What's up, guys? Frank Macalusa from Garageaholic. Welcome to another sub-part of part one, where we go through and work on replacing the clutch components. We're going to be inspecting them, we're going to be replacing them. We're going to talk about pressure plate resetting if necessary, and we're also going to be talking about holding the flywheel in place such that you can remove these things without having to spin the crank. Now that we've removed the transmission, as you saw earlier in part one, we can now access the clutch, the pressure plate, the flywheel, and of course getting to the rear main seal eventually. But today we're going to be talking only about clutch replacement. Now these are H6, there's 6 of those bolts that hold the pressure plate to the flywheel. And in order to remove this effectively, there's 2 different ways that you can go about holding the actual crankshaft. The first way is actually getting a socket on the crankshaft, bolt on the front of the car, and holding it, maybe having a friend hold it while you remove the bolts on the backside. It's going to be most prevalent when you're trying to remove the flywheel more so than the pressure plate, because that requires a lot more torque to remove. But you can always do that. That's actually quite difficult to do. So here's another very easy approach. And that approach is using a keyway holder for the flywheel. There's many different ways and shapes and sizes that these come in. The link is down in the description. You can see down below about how to acquire these. But this is actually pretty simple. You use the existing holes in the engine block or the oil pan in order to use the keyway to hold the transmission, to hold the flywheel in place with the toothed gear. When you hold this in place, it actually locks the flywheel in place, allowing you to use your torque to undo all of these bolts. So it's actually pretty easy and very user-friendly. Now that we got the flywheel is locked in place, we can take these H6 and break them loose, break all 6 of them loose. And you have to be very, very careful about making sure that this is seated properly in these, because if you will strip these if you're not careful. They're very prone to stripping. So you have to be very careful about getting this seated perfectly in. If you don't, it's going to be a real pain in the butt to remove later. That's 2. Now that I've gotten them all basically loose, the clutch plate is now loose inside of there, which means that the pressure plate is sufficiently removed from the flywheel. I can take these guys down one at a time. Start with the harder ones first. And you want your easiest one to be the lowest one. That way you can hold it and easily remove it at your leisure. And you want to hold both. Oh, the clutch is still sitting in there, so you gotta be careful. It comes right off. So as you can see, I removed the clutch disc and the pressure plate assembly. This is actually a lightweight flywheel, which is pretty cool. It's an 8-bolt flywheel, which is the better, more modern version of the flywheel as opposed to the 6-bolt version. This is a Turner Motorsport lightweight flywheel. I don't know if you can see the insignia right there. It's kind of says Turner there. So this is a performance flywheel. I think that it's best to keep this here. We will be removing it to take a look at the rear main seal and replacing that. But taking a look at the clutch disc and the pressure plate setup, you'll see that this is a self-adjusting pressure plate. You know that because there's 3 springs here. This is basically brand new. Actually, not only is the clutch disc itself has tons of meat on it, it doesn't smell at all either. There's no organic smell of this clutch disc like you'd smell like from a burning or old clutch disc. And another clue here is that this flywheel has self-adjusting pressure plate capability, meaning that when the driver's driving the car and the clutch disc wears out, the actual pedal feels the same to the driver. So what happens is there's a little mechanism in here that slowly turns due to the pressure from these 3 springs, and it makes the clutch pedal feel exactly the same as the clutch disc is getting thinner and thinner and thinner. In this case, the original black markings here, this black line here that was made by the factory, is not moved. If it was moved, you'd see the whole thing. You'd see that this spring would actually move, and these 2 lines would no longer be in contact with each other, lined up. So this is actually completely factory and very, very new, so I'm not going to be replacing it. In fact, I'm just going to be reinstalling it. For the purposes of rear main seal removal, you do need to remove the flywheel. Now, as I said earlier, the flywheel is still locked, which means that we can take these and zip them out, remove this lock, and then we can basically take the flywheel off of its clocked hinge. You'll see that it is clocked. There is a way to clock it. There is a larger set hole inside the backside between the flywheel and the block that you can only install the flywheel in one location, one indexing orientation. So we're going to remove these 8, and then we're going to remove this, and then the whole thing's going to come right out. Uh-oh. So what I'm seeing here is that there is a mushroomed tip here. This is actually not supposed to be a mushroom tip. It's actually supposed to be a cylindrical set out protrusion that aligns the flywheel with this setup. And actually, the original user had installed this incorrectly. This needs to be removed, and a correct one needs to be put in. You can see right here that there is a spot for that protrusion to go in this flywheel. That's where it's supposed to go, but it looks like it went right here, where it ended up making a bit of a hole or a crater in this clocking position instead. So that is a bad on the previous owner who installed this, and what we need to do is make sure that we get it right and install it on the correct clock setting. A new dowel has been purchased. You can see it right there. Compare it with the old dowel. You'll see that the old one was certainly mushroomed out because it was used in the wrong position. Putting the new dowel here, there's tons of clearance to put it in. You can take it in, throw it right in there. It actually is a tighter clearance on the actual crank. So we'll end up taking it and putting it in the crank and then giving it a light tap so it sits in there with a really nice tight interference. Lining up the dowel pins allows a very easy and seamless installation. Hold it in place and put an arbitrary bolt in there and kind of get it in just to get it started. Then do all the other bolts and torque. Before you torque anything down, just make sure that you have your flywheel holder in place. Always torque in a star pattern. Now that everything's been tightened up, it's time to install the clutch disc back on. Now, we're actually reusing this clutch disc because it is relatively brand new and there's still tons of life left in it. So what we're going to be doing here is reinstalling the clutch disc. Now, this side that has the writing, I forgot what this is called. It's called Getricite. That means transmission side. So that, with the writing on it, goes to the transmission side. This is your clutch alignment tool that has the spline and the hole that goes right in to align the clutch. Okay? Then it's a matter of installing the pressure plate. Rotate it as you need to get it clocked correctly. And then you just thread your bolts back on. All right, guys, that clutch has been removed, inspected, reinstalled, new hardware, torqued to spec. My name is Frank Macaluso from Garageaholic on this N54 maintenance video series. If you like what you see, please smash that like button and let me know what you think in the comment section. Thanks a lot, guys, and keep on watching. Let me know. Thanks, guys. Take it easy. Later.